Ladies and gentlemen, sure, here's a powerful Jessica-style intro for your motivational speech titled Watch This Before June 27, 2025 reveals God's final warning, dramatic, engaging, and emotionally stirring. Intro Jessica style. Before you scroll past, stop. This is not just another video. This is a final call, a divine interruption. Something is coming, and it's not random. By the time June 27, 2025 arrives, your life will either be aligned or left behind. I don't say this to scare you, I say this because you were meant to hear it. You've been asking for signs, you've been begging for direction, and now heaven is answering. This isn't about religion. It's about awakening, about returning to the truth you've buried beneath fear, distraction, and delay. God is not silent. His final warning is echoing through the noise, through the pain, through the moments you thought were meaningless. But nothing has been meaningless. This message, it was scheduled for you. Before the chaos gets louder, before your doubts win, watch this. Let it shift you, let it save you, let it remind you that you're not forgotten, you're being called. There is a moment before every storm when the wind pauses, the air thickens, and everything seems too still. That silence is not peace, it's preparation. The same thing happens in life. Often, right before the most significant shift or divine intervention, there's a calm that feels unsettling. You stop feeling the urgency you once had, the noise around you quiets down, the distractions lose their grip. It's not because everything is fine, it's because something is coming, something that requires your full awareness, your absolute attention. But many people mistake this silence for a sign that nothing is happening. They let their guard down, they slow their spiritual pace, they settle back into comfort, and in doing so, they miss what the silence was sent to signal. God doesn't always shout when he's about to move. Sometimes he withdraws his voice to see if you're still listening. He allows the noise to die down so your spirit can detect the subtleties. If you're always looking for fireworks, you'll miss the whisper. If you wait for a crisis to finally turn to God, you'll misunderstand the gift of preparation he gave you in the quiet. This season of stillness that you're in, it's not lifeless, it's loaded. Every moment, every breath, every pause is sacred. The silence isn't absence, it's strategy. It's the holy tension before revelation. And if you're not spiritually awake, you'll think nothing is happening when in reality, everything is shifting under the surface. The world conditions you to equate movement with progress, but in the kingdom, waiting is often working. God does some of his most powerful work in stillness. He repositions you without noise. He transforms you without announcements. But we've grown impatient with silence. We want quick answers, instant clarity, visible change. So we distract ourselves during the most critical moments, scrolling, escaping, numbing, just to avoid the discomfort of not knowing. But there is something powerful that only silence can teach you: how to listen beyond what's being said, how to discern what's invisible, and how to recognize divine timing without needing a clock. You might feel like your life has been placed on pause. Like your prayers are hanging in the air unanswered. Like you're ready for the next step, but nothing is moving. That's the silence before the shift. It's the space where heaven reorganizes things, where angels are dispatched, where doors are prepared. And if you rush out of that space, if you misinterpret the stillness as stagnation, you'll step ahead of God and walk into something you weren't equipped to handle. That's why this silence is not a punishment, it's protection. It's mercy, it's a divine signal that says, stay alert, stay sensitive, something is about to be revealed. God is a God of patterns. If you study scripture, you'll see this rhythm again and again, silence before movement. The Israelites wandered in silence before the walls of Jericho fell. Elijah waited through a wind, an earthquake, and fire before hearing God in a gentle whisper. Even Jesus was silent during his trial before the resurrection. So why do we expect our own journey to be filled with constant noise, constant confirmation, constant activity? The silence is part of the process. It's not the end of the story. It's the hidden chapter where your faith is refined and your ears are tuned. It's where you either fall back into distraction or move forward in discernment. When you know what you've been called to do, when the direction has been made clear to you, and yet you continue to hesitate, delay, or reason your way out of action, you're not simply being careful, you're being disobedient. Delayed obedience is still disobedience. We often convince ourselves that we're just waiting for the right moment, for the right signs, for more clarity or confidence. But deep down, we already know what's required. God rarely gives all the details before He expects you to move. He gives enough for you to trust Him, not enough for you to trust yourself. And in that gap between instruction and execution, many of us fall into spiritual stagnation under the disguise of patience. There's a cost to waiting too long. Every moment you delay the call God has placed on your life, you're not just pausing your progress. You're affecting the lives you were meant to impact. Purpose is not self-contained. It ripples. Your obedience is the answer to someone else's prayer. When you hold back, when you choose comfort over calling, when you let fear write the narrative, you rob others of the break through your obedience could release. It's not just about your timeline. It's about divine alignment. There are people waiting on the other side of your yes. And when you postpone that yes, you create a spiritual traffic jam that affects more than just you. We underestimate the urgency of our obedience. We treat God's instruction like suggestions. We wait for convenience. We wait for approval. We wait until we feel ready. But the truth is, you will never feel fully ready for what God has called you to do. Because the call is designed to stretch you, to pull you beyond your limits, to show you that it's not by your strength, but by His. So if you're waiting for the fear to go away, you'll be waiting forever. Obedience is not about waiting until the fear disappears. It's about trusting God enough to move forward in spite of it. The enemy doesn't have to steal your calling if he can convince you to delay it. Delay is one of his most subtle and effective tactics. He whispers lies like you have time, maybe later, what if you fail, and before you realize it, years have passed. You're still circling the same mountain, still talking about what you're going to do one day, still avoiding the step you know you should have taken yesterday, and the longer you wait, the heavier the regret becomes. The more comfortable you get in the wrong season, the more disconnected you become from the urgency of the Spirit. There are doors that only open in specific seasons, opportunities that are time-sensitive. Divine moments that pass if you're not prepared to act, and while God's grace is sufficient, His timing is also precise. There's a reason He nudges you when He does. There's a reason that conviction doesn't let you rest. It's not just motivation, it's a call to immediate action, and every time you ignore it, your sensitivity to His voice fades a little more, your ability to discern becomes dull. That's why it's not just about obedience, it's about timely obedience. The kind that says yes before your mind talks you out of it, the kind that moves even when the path ahead isn't fully lit. God honors movement. He meets you in the step. The miracles you're waiting for aren't on the couch of contemplation. They're on the road of obedience. But you have to be willing to go, even if all you have is a word and a whisper, even if no one else understands, even if fear is screaming louder than faith. The cost of delayed obedience is often higher than we think, and the window doesn't stay open forever. We live in a world where noise is constant. Notifications, opinions, advertisements, entertainment, and fear all compete for your attention. Everywhere you turn, something is trying to speak louder than your inner peace. And in the middle of all that chaos, the voice of God still speaks, but not in the way the world does. He doesn't shout over the noise. He whispers through it, and only those who are spiritually discerning will hear Him. Discernment is more than just intuition. It's the ability to separate truth from deception, clarity from confusion, and divine instruction from emotional reaction. Without it, you will be led by anything that feels good instead of what is actually good. In these times, spiritual discernment is no longer optional. It's survival. The world is filled with counterfeit lights trying to mimic the real thing. What once was easily distinguishable has now been blurred. What's popular is being mistaken for what's right. Culture celebrates what God calls dangerous, so if your discernment isn't sharp, you will be swayed by trends instead of truth. You'll chase what glitters and miss what's gold. You'll follow voices that sound good but lead you far from God. Discernment keeps you anchored when the world is drifting. It tells you when to speak and when to stay silent, when to move and when to wait, who to trust and who to walk away from. One of the reasons many people miss what God is doing is because they expect Him to speak in dramatic ways. But God often reveals himself in subtle shifts, in moments that seem ordinary. He will use the discomfort, the delays, the unexpected encounters, and even the closed doors to guide you. But if you're not discerning, you'll mislabel divine direction as inconvenience. You'll see protection as rejection. You'll fight to reopen doors that God closed for your safety. That's why discernment is not just about hearing. It's about interpreting what you hear correctly. It's about having eyes that see beyond the surface and ears that listen past the noise. Spiritual discernment doesn't just develop by accident. It's cultivated in silence, in prayer, in reading the Word, in fasting, and in learning to disconnect from constant distractions. You cannot expect to discern God's voice if you're constantly feeding your soul with everything but His truth. You must create space for His voice to rise above the noise. Sometimes that means shutting off your phone. Sometimes that means stepping away from people who cloud your clarity. Sometimes it means being still when everything in you wants to react. The quieter your environment, the clearer the voice of God becomes. Discernment also requires humility. You cannot discern what God is saying if you're already convinced of your own way. Pride will blind you to warning signs. It will make you justify what God is trying to correct. Discernment thrives in hearts that are surrendered, not stubborn. It grows in those who are willing to be wrong, willing to be corrected, and willing to walk away from something that once felt right. If you only listen to voices that agree with you, you'll never develop spiritual maturity. Sometimes discernment comes through tension, through hearing something that challenges your comfort and exposes your blind spots. This world will not become quieter. If anything, the volume of distraction, deception, and division will increase. But you have the ability to tune into a different frequency. You have access to divine wisdom that cuts through confusion. But it requires discipline. It requires intentionality. It requires choosing to prioritize your spiritual senses over your physical ones. Your emotions may shout, but discernment whispers. Fear may be loud, but truth is steady. You must decide which one you will follow. In the end, those who sharpen their discernment will be the ones who recognize what God is doing when others are blind to it. There are signs all around us, moments, warnings, disruptions, that aren't random or meaningless. They're divine signals wrapped in ordinary experiences, but we've been trained to overlook them. We label them as coincidences, bad luck, or emotional phases. Yet if we paused long enough to reflect, we'd realize that many of these moments are actually prophetic warnings. They come in the form of unexpected delays, broken relationships, closed doors, inner restlessness, and spiritual discomfort. These are not just inconveniences, they're alerts. They're heaven's way of waking us up before it's too late. God often uses disruption as a language. When we ignore it, we put ourselves on dangerous ground. There are moments when things stop working for a reason, when people walk away not because you failed, but because you outgrew that level of connection. When what used to bring comfort now causes unease. These shifts aren't meant to break you, they're meant to reposition you. But if you don't have the spiritual sensitivity to notice them, you'll try to restore what God is trying to remove. You'll fight for what's familiar while forfeiting your future. God's prophetic signs are often inconvenient. They don't arrive on your schedule. They interrupt your routine. They challenge your attachments. And that's why most people miss them, because they're too committed to comfort to recognize the warning. Sometimes the sign is internal. It's that unexplainable heaviness you carry in certain places, that voice telling you not to go. That shift in your spirit when everything on the outside still looks perfect. The world teaches you to trust your eyes, but God trains you to trust your spirit. He'll show you what your eyes can't see. That's why you can't base your decisions only on logic. Spiritual signs don't always make sense in the natural. Noah built an ark before there was rain. Moses stood before Pharaoh before there was freedom. Jesus wept over a city that didn't even recognize who he was. In every case, there were signs, but only those with discernment understood their weight. There's also a pattern in Scripture. God never moves in judgment or deliverance without warning first. He always sends a message, a prophet, a sign. Before the flood, there was a warning. Before the plagues, there was a warning. Before Jerusalem fell, there was a warning, and today, those same principles apply. The problem is, most people don't want to hear the warning. They want blessings without conviction, freedom without transformation, miracles without responsibility. So when the signs show up, they're ignored. People get annoyed by the message instead of awakened by it, but ignoring the warning doesn't stop the consequences. It only removes your preparation. You've probably already seen the signs, the changes in atmosphere, the sense that something in the world is shifting, the spiritual fatigue, the moral decay, the rise of confusion, the battle for truth. These are not just social or political issues, they're signs, warnings. Invitations to return to the one who holds time and eternity in his hands. Every shaking is a call to deeper alignment. Every interruption is a plea to reposition your focus. If you wait for things to get louder, you might be too late. God often speaks early, quietly, and consistently, but the longer you ignore the signs, the harder your heart becomes to them. You don't have to be a prophet to recognize a pattern. You just need to pay attention. The signs are not hidden. They're often obvious, but they require humility to acknowledge. It takes courage to say, this isn't just a bad season, this is a divine interruption. It takes surrender to stop trying to control everything and start seeking the one who controls it all. You may not understand the full meaning of every sign, but you are responsible for responding to what you do sense. When something doesn't sit right in your spirit, don't push past it. When your peace leaves, don't ignore it. When God starts removing things, don't cling to them. The signs are speaking louder now than ever before. There are moments in life when time carries more weight, when certain dates aren't just numbers on a calendar, but spiritual markers in the unseen realm. June 27, 2025 is one of those markers. It's not about superstition or fear, it's about spiritual alignment and divine timing. There are seasons when God calls his people to wake up, to pay attention, to reposition their lives before something shifts in the atmosphere. When God sets a timeline, it's not because he's bound by time, it's because we are. We operate within the boundaries of seasons and moments, and God speaks through them. The urgency of alignment is not just about avoiding consequences, it's about stepping into divine order while the window is still open. Alignment is when your life, your thoughts, your actions, and your spirit are in sync with God's will. It's when you stop chasing your own plans and start submitting to divine purpose. Many people live in partial obedience, in partial surrender, and then wonder why they feel spiritually off. Alignment is not about perfection, it's about posture. It's about being positioned correctly so that when God moves, you're not left behind. It's recognizing that certain doors only open when you're standing in the right place spiritually. That certain blessings are attached to obedience, and that disobedience delays the promise, not because God is withholding, but because you're not ready to carry it. The urgency of this alignment is rooted in the reality that time is running out for casual Christianity, for lukewarm living, for spiritual procrastination. The signs are intensifying, the shaking is increasing, and the space for indecision is shrinking. There is coming a moment when neutrality will no longer be an option. You will either be fully surrendered or completely out of position. That's why this message is a wake-up call, because God, in his mercy, always gives space to align before the shift comes. He gives warning before judgment. He gives grace before the door closes. But grace is not a guarantee of unlimited time. It's a window, and windows eventually shut. Some people wait for crisis to align. They wait for everything to fall apart before they fall on their knees. But spiritual maturity means choosing alignment in advance, not as a reaction. It means recognizing the voice of the Spirit before the storm hits. It means hearing the whispers before the world starts shouting. Alignment is a decision you make in the quiet place, in your habits, in your priorities, in the things you choose to feed your spirit. You can't live off of borrowed faith. You can't depend on someone else's fire to keep your own heart burning. Alignment requires personal pursuit. It requires sacrifice. It requires letting go of what God never told you to carry. This moment in time is not random. The date has been marked not just by heaven, but by what is shifting in the world. And the people who are aligned will not be shaken. They will be elevated. They will see what others miss. They will walk through doors others are blind to. But alignment doesn't happen by accident. It's intentional, it's costly. It means choosing discipline over distraction. It means choosing conviction over comfort. It means making space for God in a world that keeps telling you to fill your time with everything else. The urgency of alignment is not meant to instill panic, it's meant to provoke preparation. Because something is coming, and only those who are aligned will be ready to stand when it does. The enemy's goal is to keep you distracted just long enough to miss your moment. To convince you that you have more time, to make you believe that alignment can wait. But what if it can't? What if the reason you've been feeling the pressure, the internal tug, the growing discomfort, is because your spirit knows time is short? God often allows tension to build so you'll be driven into alignment. He removes what no longer fits. He disturbs what you tried to settle in. He calls louder through the silence until you can no longer ignore it. And in that moment, the question is not whether God is speaking. It's whether you're willing to respond before the shift arrives. There is a moment when God stops calling gently and begins calling urgently. That moment is not announced with fanfare, and it doesn't come with flashing signs. It comes in the stillness of your spirit, in the tightening of your chest, in the undeniable feeling that this is the last time you'll be nudged before something breaks open. The final call to return is not about fear, it's about love. It's about a God who is patient beyond understanding, but also just and holy. There comes a point when his silence isn't permission, it's the final warning. The door of grace is open, but it won't stay open forever, and when it shuts, it will shut suddenly. This call is not to the world, it's to the ones who know better. The ones who have felt God's presence but drifted. The ones who have heard his voice but tuned it out. The ones who once burned with passion but have gone numb. This is the call to return before your heart hardens beyond repair, before your spirit becomes too desensitized to even notice you've left the path. God is not calling you back to religion. He's calling you back to relationship, to the place where you once wept in his presence, where your soul was aligned with purpose, where your life had clarity that didn't come from the world. And now he's saying, come home, not next month, not when it's convenient, now. There is a spiritual urgency in the air, a sense that what's coming will separate the casual from the committed, and those who respond to this call will be hidden, protected, and prepared. But those who ignore it will feel the shaking more violently than ever before. The call to return is not about guilt, it's about rescue. It's the lifeline thrown to the one who's drifting in comfort, compromise, or chaos. It's not because God is angry, it's because he sees what you don't. He knows what's ahead, and his mercy always calls louder right before a turning point. Many think they have time. They assume there will always be another chance, another Sunday, another moment to get it together. But Scripture shows that the door doesn't always stay open. In Noah's time, people ignored the warning until the rain came. Once the door of the ark closed, it was too late. In the parable of the 10 virgins, 5 were ready and 5 were not. When the bridegroom arrived, the door was shut, and those who were unprepared were locked out, not because they weren't invited, but because they didn't take the invitation seriously. God always sends the call. But he won't wait forever for a response. You've felt it, that internal pull, that voice that interrupts your distractions, that unrest that won't let you settle. That's the final call. It's not just a thought, it's the Spirit of God tugging at your soul. He's reminding you who you are. He's calling you out of everything that's dimmed your light, diluted your purpose, and deceived your heart. He's not asking for performance. He's asking for presence, for surrender, for a decision. This is the moment to return before what's ahead forces you to. It doesn't matter how far you've drifted, how long you've run, or how many wrong turns you've taken. The call to return is still extended. But every moment you delay, the risk grows. Not because God's love is running out, but because time is. The enemy doesn't mind if you believe in God, as long as you keep delaying your return, because delayed return leads to distance, and distance leads to disconnection. The final call isn't loud in the world's terms, it's loud in your spirit. It won't always come again. When God calls, it's because he knows the exact timing of what's about to unfold. And he loves you too much to let you walk into it unprepared. The return isn't about religion, routine, or ritual. It's about rescue, relationship, and realignment.